Okay, picture this. These huge snow-dusted mountains basically guarding villages, and the homes almost look like they've grown right out of the earth.
Hmm.
That's Hunza in Pakistan. Now think about the challenge, not just living there, but building a home in a place with such a dramatic climate and, the constant threat of earthquakes.
Absolutely. And that traditional architecture you see there, well, it's more than just pretty, isn't it? It's a really powerful example of how people adapt to uh, a really demanding environment.
Right.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at the remarkable benefits of using local stuff, local materials, to build houses in Hunza, based on the info we've been digging into.
Exactly. So forget, factories miles away and complex global shipping. Our goal here is to understand why Hunza's traditional building ways aren't just like charming museum pieces.
Hmm.
We want to see how they're actually incredibly smart, good for the wallet, good for the environment, really tied into their culture, and crucially, perfectly designed for the region's unique challenges. We've got some fascinating material, some general ideas about why local sourcing is good, and then a really focused look specifically at Hunza.
Yep.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Just basically, why does choosing local materials even matter in the first place?
Well, often the first thing people notice is the cost.
Hmm.
I mean, using resources that are right there, nearby,
Mm-hmm.
it cuts down transportation costs significantly.
Right. No long hauls.
Exactly. You're not paying to truck materials across the country or even internationally.
Mm-hmm.
And often the materials themselves are just, well, cheaper to get hold of locally.
Mm-hmm.
And that directly helps the local economy, keeps money in the community, supports local jobs.
That seems like a clear win-win. Less travel, lower costs, stronger local economy. And then there's a whole environmental side, which feels especially important now.
Oh, definitely. When you build using stuff sourced nearby, you drastically cut the carbon footprint of the whole building process.
Less fuel burned.
Less fuel, yeah. And many local materials like timber from forests managed sustainably, or just earth, mud, clay, they're renewable or naturally abundant. Plus, you get way less packaging waste compared to materials that come out of big industrial processes.
So it's not just easier on the budget, it's much kinder to the planet, too. What's interesting is how these local choices then directly affect how well the building actually, works in its setting.
Precisely. Think about it. Materials that have sort of evolved naturally in a specific climate are just inherently suited to it.
Mm.
We see this everywhere, really.
Like what?
Well, clay or mud in really hot places, great insulation against the heat. Stone in colder areas has high thermal mass,
Thermal mass.
meaning it takes a long time to heat up and a long time to cool down. So like a heavy stone wall absorbs the sun's heat during the day
Okay.
and then slowly releases that warmth back into the house at night. Keeps the temperature much more stable.
Ah, so it's not just about blocking the weather out, it's about working with it, sort of harmonizing.
Yes.
And if the materials are right there, easy to get, I guess the building process itself moves faster.
It certainly can, yeah. Getting hold of materials is quicker,
Right.
and you tend to avoid those complicated supply chain delays that can really mess up a project schedule.
I can imagine, especially in remote places.
Yeah, that efficiency boost can be a really big deal in areas that are harder to reach.
Beyond all the practical stuff, though, there's also this sense of beauty, right? And a connection to the place itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Local materials just naturally fit in with the existing look of a place. It creates this feeling of visual and cultural continuity.
Mhm.
And using these materials is a tangible way to keep heritage alive, maintaining traditional building techniques that have been passed down, strengthening a region's unique identity.
It's like the buildings are speaking the same, visual language as the landscape.
That's a nice way to put it.
And this directly helps the community, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you choose local materials, you're directly supporting local workers, local craftspeople. It encourages those traditional skills to continue, to be refined even. You get this quality of work that comes from generations of knowledge.
Okay, so those are really strong arguments for going local generally. Now, let's zoom in specifically on Hunza. How do these benefits show up in that incredible mountain environment?
Right. So all those advantages we just talked about, they become even more sort of amplified in Hunza's specific situation. Take climate adaptation. The mix of stone and mud you see everywhere in traditional Hunza homes, it's not just for looks. It provides amazing natural insulation against both the freezing winters and the surprisingly warm summers they get.
Yeah, both extremes.
Yeah. And those flat roofs with the wooden beams, the dundas, they're specifically designed to handle heavy snow loads, but they also help regulate temperature inside.
Okay.
Plus the really thick walls you often see, essential for holding on to heat during the cold months.
It sounds like the whole design is just a direct answer to the environment. And since Hunza is in an active earthquake zone, I'm really curious how local materials help with safety.
That's a really critical point. The traditional building techniques, things like dry stone masonry, where stones are stacked without mortar, and timber-laced construction, known as the Batar technique, they offer a surprising amount of flexibility.
Flexibility. How so?
Well, think about the timber lacing. It's like weaving wooden beams into the stone walls. It's not just holding things rigidly together like concrete would.
Ah,
It's more like how a woven basket can flex and shift under stress without breaking. It allows the building to sway a bit during an earthquake, absorb the shock, instead of just cracking apart.
that's a great comparison. Flexibility over rigidity. That makes sense in earthquake country. And you mentioned the low environmental impact earlier. How does that work out specifically in Hunza?
Well, the main building blocks, stone they get locally from quarries or riverbeds, mud from the valley floor, wood like poplar and willow from nearby forests. They need very little transportation.
Right. So that dramatically cuts down fuel use and emissions. And these materials, they don't need intense energy-guzzling industrial processing. It makes the whole approach much more eco-friendly and sustainable long-term.
So it's inherently low impact.
Mm.
And that cultural preservation piece must be huge in a place with such a distinct identity like Hunza.
Oh, absolutely. The consistent use of stone, wood, and mud is really fundamental to the unique look and feel of Hunza's villages, places like Altik, Karimabad, Ganesh. By keeping these traditions going, they're not just building houses, they're actively preserving their heritage, these building styles that are so deeply connected to the landscape and the community's values.
Maintaining that visual harmony, that historical thread. And just practically speaking, what about the cost and just getting hold of these materials in Hunza?
Yeah, in a relatively remote area like Hunza, the fact that materials like mud, river stones, slate, local timber there's a massive advantage.
It makes construction significantly cheaper compared to, the logistics and cost of trying to bring in cement, steel, or bricks from cities far away. And like we said before, this directly supports local artisans, masons, craftspeople. It keeps those traditional skills alive and provides really important local jobs.
So it's not just cheaper, it's actually empowering the local economy. Okay, and finally, touching on something I know a lot of people appreciate, the look, the feel. How do local materials create that unique Hunza aesthetic?
Well, the natural materials just create this seamless visual link with the amazing mountain scenery all around.
Yeah, they really blend in.
The colors, the textures of the stone, the wood, the earth, they just echo the natural palette of the region and this authentic sort of rustic charm. It's not just nice to look at, it actually boosts Hunza's appeal for tourism. Visitors are drawn to that unique, unspoiled character.
It's that deep sense of place made real. Now, you mentioned some specific local materials. Can we dig a bit deeper into those? What are they and what are their main benefits?
Sure. So stone, often from riverbeds or mountain slopes, is obviously very durable.
Yeah.
It's also a good natural insulator, and it just looks beautiful, very solid.
Right.
Then you have mud and clay, just from the valley soil. Super cheap, good insulation, and surprisingly breathable, which actually makes for a healthier indoor air quality.
Interesting. Breathable. Okay.
Then there's timber, mostly local poplar and willow, used for the main structure, roofing beams, window frames, that sort of thing. Slate, which they quarry locally, makes for really durable and attractive flaring or sometimes roofing. And finally, lime plaster, made from local limestone, is used as a finish. It seals things up, it still allows the walls to breathe, and it even has natural antibacterial properties.
Wow, it's like a whole ecosystem of materials, each doing its job. Now, we had a listener ask specifically about the typical layout of a Hunza house using these materials. What are the main design thoughts behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The main goals are usually about maximizing thermal insulation, keeping warm in those harsh winters, ensuring the house can withstand earthquakes, using those traditional techniques we talked about, obviously prioritizing natural and local materials, making sure there's good natural light and ventilation, and finding a nice blend between the traditional look and feel and modern comforts.
And what about specific materials for different parts of the house? What would you recommend?
Okay, so for the outside walls, often a mix of river stone set in mud mortar, maybe finished with a lime plaster. That gives you strength and good insulation.
Okay.
Inside walls could be adobe sun-dried mud bricks or maybe compressed earth blocks.
Right.
For that classic flat roof, you'd use wooden beams, poplar, or willow.
Mm-hmm.
Then layers of insulation, maybe natural stuff, topped with mud plaster.
And floors.
Flooring often uses that local slate or sometimes just tacked earth,
Yeah.
which you'd then cover with rugs for warmth and comfort. Window frames would be wood, ideally with double glazing for better insulation.
Double glazing. Okay, so mixing modern tech there.
Exactly. And for the insulation itself, you could use traditional materials like straw or sheep wool, maybe boosted with some mineral wool if needed for extra thermal performance.
Sounds like a really smart mix of old and new. So what about the actual floor plan? If you were designing a typical single-story home there, using these ideas?
Yeah, okay, thinking single story. You probably want an entrance veranda or porch facing south. That catches the winter sun and acts as a kind of airlock, a thermal buffer.
Smart.
Then moving inside, the main living area, the Bothak, also ideally south-facing for that passive solar heat. You'd use those thick stone and mud walls for thermal mass, maybe have a traditional wood stove, the Bukhari, for heating, and you'd see those lovely exposed wood beams, maybe some traditional carving.
Nice.
The kitchen could be right next to the living area, sharing some of that warmth. Wood or gas stove, maybe a little pantry built into a cool spot, and definitely a vent in the roof.
Okay.
Bedrooms, maybe 2 or 3, often face north or east. You'd want smaller windows there to reduce heat loss, thick mud walls again, and maybe some built-in wooden storage to save space. Bathroom, probably best on the west or north side, kept fairly compact to conserve heat. And you might even consider a dry or composting toilet, especially further out.
Right. Practical.
And finally, maybe a utility or storage room, north-facing so it stays cooler, good for storing firewood or grains.
It's also connected, isn't it? The direction it faces, the materials, the layout, everything seems to be working together. Any specific tips on climate and orientation?
Yeah, definitely prioritize those south-facing windows for winter sun and daylight.
Right.
Keep north-facing windows smaller to cut down heat loss.
Right.
Really leverage that thermal mass in the walls, stone and mud, to soak up heat and release it slowly. The flat earthen roof is key for snow load and insulation. And don't forget roof overhangs to keep rain off the walls.
Good point. And you had a couple of bonus features, too.
Yeah, a few nice extras. You could have a roof garden, the traditional chom style, good for growing herbs, or just as another layer of insulation.
Cool.
Rainwater harvesting is very doable. Just slope the roof slightly, add a gutter, collect the water in a tank. Sustainable water use.
Makes sense.
And with all the sun Hunza gets, solar panels could be a great addition if the budget allows. Oh, and one more thing. Building shelves right into those thick walls saves space, means less freestanding furniture, and keeps the thermal mass working effectively.
It really is a holistic approach, isn't it? Resourceful. Everything seems to do double duty. So, okay, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the absolute key takeaways about using local materials in Hunza?
I think the main thing is how interconnected all the benefits are. Economically, it cuts costs, boosts local jobs. Environmentally, it slashes the carbon footprint. It's sustainable. Culturally, it keeps that unique Hunza heritage alive.
Yep.
And practically, it just results in homes that are incredibly well suited to the climate and surprisingly resilient to earthquakes. It directly tackles the region's biggest challenges. These traditional practices, they're not just history. They're actually a really smart blueprint for building well.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, maybe a thought to leave you, the listener, with. Reflecting on how ingeniously Hunza adapted to its unique place, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our own areas, maybe very different places, are we maybe overlooking simple, effective ways to stay cool or warm that our ancestors just knew? Perhaps relying too much on energy-guzzling modern systems. Is there some forgotten wisdom in traditional ways around the world that could actually help us build more sustainably today?
That's a really great question to ponder. It really makes you think about the value of that local indigenous knowledge and how we might thoughtfully blend those time-tested ideas with modern innovations. Maybe it inspires you to look into the traditional building techniques from your own region, or check out architects and builders today who are really focusing on local, sustainable materials. There's probably a ton of practical cultural wisdom out there just waiting to be rediscovered and used again.